Well, chapter 48 of Jeremiah is what we're going to talk about today. This chapter is the prophecy from Jeremiah of the Lord that's to the Moabites. Not the people from southern Utah, not people who go down there and ride the slick rock. Moabites, this is a group of people who are descendants of the daughters of Lot. If you go back into your book of Genesis, you remember Lot and his family were the ones living in Sodom and Gomorrah, that area, you remember? And then they fled, and his wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt and died. And so Lot, and his two daughters left. And according to the story, his daughters claim because it's them, one man, their dad, and he's got two daughters, no sons to carry the lineage forward. So these two daughters took it upon themselves to carry their father's lineage forward by getting him drunk and then sleeping with him and getting pregnant by him and then raising children to their dad so that he would have some sons or some men to carry the line forward. Little did they know that every person carries DNA inside your body, in the mitochondria of your body, that has your mother's DNA in it. So it's easier to identify you with your mother than it is your father. But they didn't understand DNA technology back then. But that's their culture. That's their belief. So you got to realize when you're looking, especially here in the Old Testament, that there's a lot of stuff in here that sounds weird to our day and age. We interpret it very different than they would. So do not look at the Old Testament from the lens of today. Look at the Old Testament from their perspective, okay? Really use both of those perspectives to understand it. We can look at it from our perspective and go, these guys are crazy. But if we look at it from their perspective, it kind of makes a little more sense because of the culture and the times and traditions that they had. That was what led them to the decisions that they made. Now, we think about it way differently today, and that's okay. Just realize that we can't judge the past by the present. We have to judge the past by the past because the rules have changed over time. So we can't judge it. They can't work on one set of rules and then be judged by a whole different set of rules that they don't even know exists. That's not fair. So judge them by their rules to better understand them. So let's talk about this group of people. It's been generations since Lot and his daughters, and so let's talk about them. Verse 1, against Moab, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, woe unto Nebo, for it is spoiled. Kirithaim is confounded and taken, Misgab is confounded and dismayed. So these people lived on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. Okay, so Israel usually had the western side of the Dead Sea. Israel was on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. Even though the Moabites are distant relatives of Israel, Lot was the nephew of Abraham, so they're distant cousins, basically. They don't really like each other. There's a lot of fighting that goes back and forth. In fact, it's believed that Moab probably submitted to Babylon after the Battle of Carchemish when Egypt lost in 605 BC. They did not seem to be a part of the Judah revolt in 594 and 587 BC. They came to an end as a nation in 582 BC, destroyed them after a rebellion. This is also when a third deportation of Judah happened. Shortly after this, an Arab invasion overwhelmed the land, and the nation of Moab would never exist again. So that's kind of a short idea of Moab. They raised over there on the eastern side. As Israel went to Egypt, Moab stayed over there, and then Moses brought them back up, and then they would fight sometimes back and forth. Remember, they had to go through Moab to kind of get over to the promised land, and Moab wouldn't work with them, and so they fought them, and lots of back and forth. They family issues, definitely family issues between Israel and Moab, for sure. Now, when we look at these cities that are talked about here, okay, Nebo, this is a city of Reuben, the tribe of Reuben. He's the oldest of all of the tribes of Israel, of Jacob's sons, but was taken back by the Moabites later. So Moabites had it, then Israel showed up, took it from them, and the Moabites eventually got it back later. It probably is near Mount Nebo, which is to the north and the east of the Dead Sea, basically, so which makes sense. They grew up on the east side of the Dead Sea, so they would have that land as well. Now, Kirithaim is another city that's mentioned here in verse 1. And this is another town of Reuben that Moab did take back. And now scholars think it could be around present-day El Kiryat. I'm not sure if I said that right or not, but that's the best I'm going to do on that one. It's kind of an interesting name. So these are groups, again, at the northern end of the kingdom of Israel that Moab had at one point, and then Israel took back from them, and then they took it back from Israel at some point. So verse 2, there shall be no more praise of Moab. In Heshbon, they have devised evil against it. Come and let us cut it off from being a nation. Also thou shalt be cut down, O madmen, the sword shall pursue thee. So Heshbon is a city that's mentioned in verse 2. This used to be the capital of the Amorites, basically before Reuben and Gad took it over, basically. Now it's interesting, it talks about, O madmen, the sword shall pursue thee. Now this could be referencing a place called Dimon. Scholars think this could be Kerbet Dimneh, which is 2 miles northwest of Rabbah. So that's something you could even look up on a map today and find it. They think that's where these places are that these people are coming from. Verse 3, a voice of crying shall be from Horonaim, spoiling a great destruction. Now, unfortunately, scholars do not know where Horonaim is. It might be located near the southern end of the Dead Sea, where the Ammonites would have fled to as Babylon marched from the north, but we're not sure. Verse 4, Moab is destroyed, her little ones have caused a cry to be heard. For in the going up of Lueth, continual weeping shall go up. For in the going down of Horonaim, the enemies have heard a cry of destruction. So we don't know where Lueth is. Just not sure where that is. It's interesting that they go the going up of Lueth, and then for the going down of Horonaim could be some directions. Maybe Lueth is more to the north, and Horonaim is more in the south. Could be some possible ideas of how they use directions there. Verse 6, flee, save your lives, and be like the heath in the wilderness, basically. So this is get out, go hide in the wilderness, get out in the woods, get away from Babylon, basically, and try to survive on your own. It's every man for themselves kind of idea. Verse 7, for because thou hast trusted in thy works and in thy treasures, thou shalt also be taken. So because they believed in wealth, physical and physical resources more than God, they're going to lose, basically. And continuing on, and Chemosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together. So Chemosh is a false god, one of the idols that they worshipped, basically. And so that religion is going to go away. They're all going to go into captivity. Verse 8, and the spoiler shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. The valley also shall perish, and the plain shall be destroyed, as the Lord hath spoken. So Babylon's going everywhere. Complete destruction. Verse 9, give wings unto Moab, that it may flee and get away. For the cities thereof shall be desolate, without any to dwell therein. Now it's interesting. This chapter is not so much about Moab fleeing as it is saying to salt the cities, which means destruction. So while it says give wings to Moab, they're not saying we're going to get Moab out of here. Although a remnant probably does survive of Moab, and then they'll be later brought back, as we'll find. But most of Moab's going to be completely wiped out. They won't be an existing nation. They'll just be a bunch of people living out there, basically. Verse 10, cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceitfully. Cursed be he that keepeth back his sword from blood. Now we could look at this idea as a sense of a reference to the destroyer, like the destroyer that God sent to the Egyptians during Moses' time. Or that we could think about this and realize that he's really talking to the priests. Cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceitfully. So false priests, false religions, false practices, basically. They've been wicked, and the priests have sent them that way. 11, Moab hath been at ease from his youth, and he hath settled on his lees. So they've kind of been able to fly under the radar. They haven't been bothered by a lot of these major armies, and now that's not the case anymore, basically. Let's see, it says, and hath not been emptied from vessel to vessel, neither hath he gone into captivity. Therefore his taste remaineth in him, and his scent is not changed. So let's look at that last line there. So this is like aged wine. Okay, his taste remaineth in him. He hasn't been messed with. They haven't tinkered, haven't messed with him, haven't got, they've kind of been lulled into a false sense of security because these other armies, the other problems that Judah has gone through, they just sat in the mountains and looked at Judah and went, those guys are nuts over there. Look at the problems they have. We have a pretty good lifestyle here. We're doing great. That's kind of their idea. Now, interesting too, Moab and this eastern part is known for its vines and vineyards. It's a great place for wine, or at least it used to be. So the idea of his scent has not changed. It's a great analogy for these people that using these ideas of wine, basically, to talk about Moab, and that they've had a pretty easy life. They haven't had to do a lot of changes or things because it's not been bad. And now verse 12, therefore behold the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send unto him wanderers, that shall cause him to wander, and shall empty his vessels and break their bottles. So again, dumping the wine out. All that work, all that labor, gone. Their economy, their structures, gone. 13, and Moab shall be ashamed of Chemosh. Remember, Chemosh is their favorite idol. That's the god of the land. They're going to be ashamed of him. Why? As the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel, their confidence, because they'll realize that that's a fake god and he's not real and he's not helping us, basically. Verse 14, how say ye, we are mighty and strong men for the war? Moab is spoiled and gone up out of her cities, and his chosen young men are gone down to the slaughter, saith the king, whose name is the Lord of hosts. The calamity of Moab is near to come, and his affliction hasteth fast. All ye that are about him bemoan him. All ye that know his name say, how is the strong staff broken, and the beautiful rod? So this is the staff broken is metaphor talking about their regional influence. Basically, they won't have an influence in the area anymore. They'll just be a group of people living on the land, but they won't have a national presence, basically. Verse 18, thou daughter that dost inhabit Dibon, come down from thy glory and sit in thirst, for the spoiler of Moab shall come upon thee, and he shall destroy thy strongholds. Now, modern Dibon is where they think it could be, 4 miles north of Arnor and 13 miles east of the Dead Sea. It was here, in an impressive walled city, the Moabite stone was found in 1868. It was written by King Mesha about 850 BC and gives us the info on many of the places in this chapter. It was one of the first Canaanite texts found in the area. This Moabite stone was one of the more ancient documents they found, and it details a lot of the cities, a lot of things that we're talking about in this chapter today. Now, verse 19, O inhabitant of Arawar. So this is south of Dibon, near the Amorite kingdom in the Wadi Arnon region. The inhabitants of the city will watch the Moabites flee and wonder what's going on, basically. So the inhabitants of Arawar stand by the way and espy and ask him that fleeth and that escape and her that escapeth, and say, what is done? So they don't realize that the people of Arawar don't know Babylon is marching through the area. They're going to watch the Moabites try to flee, and they're going, what are you guys doing? What's happening? What's going on here? So verse 20, Moab is confounded, for it is broken down. Howl and cry, tell yet it in Arnon that Moab is spoiled. So this, if you think about it, verse 20, the next several verses really are going to be kind of a response to the people in Arawar when they're going, what's going on? What's happening? This is what they learn. Verse 20, Moab is confounded, it is broken down, and judgment is come upon the plain country, and upon Holon and Jahazah, and upon Mephath, upon Dibon, and upon Nebo, and upon Beth Diblathaim, and upon Kirithaim, and upon Beth Gamul, and upon Beth Meon, and upon Kerioth, and upon Bozrah, and upon all the cities of the land of Moab, far or near. The horn of Moab is cut off, and his arm is broken, saith the Lord. Horn is an indication of power and strength. So have it cut off, you don't have any power. So Moab has lost its power. 26, make ye him drunk, for he magnifieth himself against the Lord. This is an important warning, okay, because the Moabites basically thought they were so good, they were so amazing because nobody was fighting with them. They kind of were left alone for the most part, that they thought it was their own might that did it. It was their own power. So they were not humble at all. Very prideful people, basically. Continuing on with verse 26, Moab also shall wallow in his vomit, and he also shall be in derision. So other metaphors of being drunk. Verse 27, for was not Israel a derision unto thee? Was he found among thieves? For since thou spakest of him, thou skippest for joy. Moab's excited. They had front row seats to watch Judah get destroyed. And they're like, yay, this is so cool. Again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, until Moab got marched on by Babylon. And then they went, oh, nope, switched. We don't like Babylon anymore. We hate them. Verse 28, O ye that dwell in Moab, leave the cities and dwell in the rock. So this is, go hide in the caves, get up in the mountains, get away. And be like the dove that maketh her nest in the sides of the hole's mouth. So get out on those cliff edges, get out where it's hard to be found. Do your best to escape Babylon, basically, is their warning. Verse 29, we have heard the pride of Moab. He is exceeding proud. His loftiness and his arrogancy and his pride and the haughtiness of his heart. I know his wrath, saith the Lord, but it shall not be so. His lies shall not so affect it. Therefore will I howl for Moab. I will cry out for all Moab. Mine heart shall mourn for the men of Kir-Heriz. Now this city, Kir-Heriz, this city means, it means potsherds and might be El Kerak. It might also be named Kir-Hadesheth, which is a city King Mesha built that is on the Moabite stone. So we could be getting a different, sometimes they didn't translate the names properly, or the names were given, we think of just a name as a name. But back then, because of how Semitic languages are built, there's lots of different meanings and ideas. Names were because of the lesson that you were going to be taught, because of the name. Verse 32, O vine of Sibmah, I will weep for thee with the weeping of Jazer. So this is a vine country. Wines are manufactured here, like we've talked about earlier. Now this place, Jazer, or Jazer, this is a place usually associated with the Amorites, which are cousins to the Moabites. They're both one from one daughter of Lot, one from the other daughter of Lot. But this may have been captured by Moab. Maybe they took this place from the Ammonites at some point. It says, thy plains are gone over the sea, they reach even to the sea of Jazer. The spoiler is fallen upon thy summer fruits and upon thy vintage. So Babylon's ruining the harvest. Verse 33, and joy and gladness is taken from the plentiful field and from the land of Moab, and I have caused wine to fail from the winepress. None shall tread with shouting, their shouting shall be no shouting. So no cheering, no joyous, no happiness that they're making more wine, have more product. It's all going to come to a halt. Verse 34, from the cry of Heshbon even unto Eliah, which is at the north end, and even unto Jahaz, which is the south end, so all the way, the whole land is what that's referencing, have they uttered their voice from Zoar even unto Horonaim, as an heifer of 3 years old, for the waters also of Nimrim shall be desolate. Now Nimrim's probably a wadi at the north end of Moab that shall run dry, so no rain coming, basically. Desolate area. So east and west, north and south, the complete area is going to be desolate. Verse 35, moreover, I will cause to cease in Moab, saith the Lord. This is who's going to no longer be around. Him that offereth in the high places, and him that burneth incense to his gods. So basically the religion at the time is going to cease. the polytheistic religions that they had back then are going to go away. Verse 36, therefore mine heart shall sound for Moab like pipes. Mine heart shall sound like pipes for the men of Kir Herez, because the riches that he hath gotten are perished. So very wealthy people. Again, they had an easy life. They didn't have a lot of armies fighting against them. They kind of flew under the radar, so nobody messed with them for the most part. That allowed them an easy lifestyle. A calm sea never made a good sailor. It's the hard seas that make you a good sailor. So these guys, they got wealthy. They had a lot of prosperity. They didn't have a lot of negatively pulling back on their economies, invading armies and destructions and pestilences and things. They lived well. They were rich and prideful because of it. They felt like, from a gospel of prosperity standpoint, they felt they were very blessed of God and they were amazing, which is why they kept believing in Chemosh, because they thought Chemosh gave them all this wealth, because he was being worshipped there and not other places. And for the most part, at least, and I'm sure there was Chemosh in other places, but they had the easy life. And now it's all gone. It's all being destroyed. Verse 37, for every head shall be bald. Remember, bald's powerless. Every beard clipped. Upon all the hands shall be cuttings, and upon the loins sackcloth. So again, these are all signs of mourning. They're mourning the loss of their nation and all of their people. There shall be lamentation generally upon all the housetops of Moab and in the streets thereof, for I have broken Moab like a vessel wherein is no pleasure, saith the Lord. They shall howl, saying, how is it broken down? How hath Moab turned back with shame? So shall Moab be a derision and a dismaying to all them about him. So the people will be surprised that such a wealthy and prideful group was destroyed. They're like, wow, we never saw that coming. But they got really destroyed. Holy cow. Verse 40, for thus saith the Lord, behold, he shall fly as an eagle and shall spread his wings over Moab. Now this is interesting, because we're going to kind of see from verse 40 on, this is interesting, okay, because this is seen as like a repetition of what we just read. So sometimes in Hebrew languages, they would repeat things and say it again. In the Septuagint, in the Greek language, they didn't think that was valuable. They think that was a waste of time and space, and so they cut that out. So the Septuagint stops about verse 39 of this chapter. If you read the Greek Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, stops at 39. They're like, we don't need the redundancy. We already got the chapter story. We're not going to repeat it. But in Hebrew, they would repeat it. So that's what verse 40 and on is about, basically. So this is about Babylon destroying the people of Moab. Like verse 41, Kerioth is taken, the strongholds are surprised. The mighty men's hearts in Moab at that day shall be as the heart of a woman in her pains. So the mighty warriors of Moab are going to feel like the similar ideas of a woman in labor. How are you going to deal with your enemies if you feel like you're in labor? You're so doubled over, you're so in pain, you're so in anguish that you're not fighting. You're afraid for everything that's going on, basically. Verse 42, and Moab shall be destroyed from being a people, because he hath magnified himself against the Lord. So again, these people thought they were better than God. And that was part of the problem that they ran into. In fact, the Old Testament study manual says the implication is not that all the Moabites would be destroyed, but that their identity as a people would cease. This prophecy was fulfilled literally, even though people continued to live in the land of Moab. They were taken captive by the Chaldeans and never afterward resumed their status as a nation. Verse 47 promises that the Lord will bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days. This passage could mean the conversion of the remnants of these people to the gospel in the last days. So a remnant of Moab will be kept. They're still descendants. Distant cousins of Abraham, but still descendants. So they will be kept as well. Verse 43, fear and the pit and the snare shall be upon thee, O inhabitant of Moab, saith the Lord. He that fleeth from the fear shall fall into the pit. So think about this. You flee out of fear from the army, and what happens? You fall into a pit. He that getteth up out of the pit shall be taken in the snare. So you get out of the pit and you fall in a trap. Another trap, basically. So this is just saying you went from fleeing the sword to falling into a pit to digging your way out of the pit to fall into a trap. You're not getting out of this. You're not going to escape it, basically. For I will bring upon it, even upon Moab, the year of their visitation, saith the Lord. So you can run, but you can't hide, basically. Verse 45, they that fled stood under the shadow of Heshbon because of the force. Not Star Wars force. Don't confuse that. But a fire shall come forth out of Heshbon, and a flame from the midst of Sion, and shall devour the corner of Moab, and the crown of the head of the tumultuous ones. So again, it's going to be just a nasty fight. Babylon burning the cities down, destroying the area, getting rid of natural resources. They're just scorching the earth. They're just going to take everybody out, basically. Verse 46, woe be unto thee, O Moab, the people of Chemosh perisheth. Okay, Chemosh is a false god. For thy sons are taken captives, and thy daughters are captives. Yet will I bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days, saith the Lord. Thus far is the judgment of Moab. So they will be scattered, but they will be gathered as well in the last days and brought in. So there is some hope for any remnants of Moab. I don't know who these people are today. I couldn't tell you where they've gone to. They were, again, probably blended into the Babylonian kingdom, and are probably people that would be descendants of people from this area. Now, this would be in today's world, present nation of Jordan would be where Moab is. Could it be descendants from them? Maybe it's not. Maybe the Jordanians are from a different group of people than Moab. Maybe Moab's more in eastern Iran or up in Turkey or something. We don't know. But there will be a promise. There is a promise, I should say, that they will be restored again to their land at some point. So we'll have to just see, as the gathering of Israel is happening in our day and age, this other gathering will happen as well. Well, I hope you're enjoying these videos, going through these chapters of Jeremiah. Please like these videos if you are. That helps them to be seen by more people. Love reading your comments and interacting with you more on those. So leave your comments on these videos too. Share this out with more people is great. Let's jump over to our next chapter, as we're going to look at a bunch of different lands of people and the prophecies against them as well.